Good day, everybody. This is the Ecclesiarch here, back with some more Warpforge. And for new players that are watching this video, I have a quick question. Out of these two cards, which one do you think is the better one? Well, if you chose Iskandar Kaon, then I'm afraid you have chosen the wrong answer. Now you might get a question, how the hell can this invincible chaos sorcerer with amazing stats and the shield on top of that be worse than this little soldier with measly stats, right? Well, that's exactly what we are going to be discussing today. So let's learn how to differentiate between good troops and bad troops. Now, as I said, this might be quite a bit confusing for newer players, but that's exactly why we are here and what we're going to be discussing. Now, every single time I'm going to explain something to you guys, I will also ask a quick question, and just like the last time, within like 5 seconds, you try to choose the correct answer, and let's see how quickly you can get a hang of this thing. Now, before we get there, let's first mention one of the most important things in Warpforge. Now, for those of you who are new, you need to understand that this is a game that is fully based on tempo. So what this means is that a lot of times the game is going to be decided by whoever is able to get the tempo going first, and whoever is able to recapture the tempo, on time before they lose the game. So what exactly do I mean by tempo? Well, it's very simple. You can divide the two players into an attacker and a defender. So the attacker would be the player who goes first, and the defender would be the player who goes second. So whenever the game starts, the player who goes first has an immediate advantage. So kind of like chess, but with the difference that the advantage here is quite huge. Some of you might have noticed that the player who goes second actually gets a lot of benefits. So they get a powerful defense card, they start with one extra card, and when the overtime hits, they're the first ones to draw 2 extra cards instead of 1. So you might get a question then, what the hell does the attacker get, right? Well, they get only a simple thing called tempo. You are gonna be the first player to drop a troop. You are gonna be the first player to start attacking. And if the opposite player is not able to recapture the tempo and become the one who's holding the board and who is attacking, well, then they're just gonna stay at a disadvantage and they're going to be stuck answering whatever plays you make with their removal and other stuff, and eventually they're just gonna run out of removal and lose the game. So a lot of things in Warpforge are exactly decided by whoever is able to recapture the tempo. That's why, for example, the Chaos ability Spawndom is so powerful, because it's a cheap tool that really helps you clear the board and leave some energy for you to play something else in order for it to recapture the tempo. Now, let's talk about the very first most important rule. The very first important rule in identifying what are the worthwhile troops and what are not are the stats, all right? So every troop that you play is going to have 3 stats, which is going to be the melee attack, the ranged attack, and health, and of course their cost. Now, we're not going to talk about troop abilities just yet, we're only going to be discussing stats, and in general there's a very simple rule of thumb when it comes to stats. You should take a look at the cost of the troop, and in general, you want the health of the troop, first of all, to be at least 1 higher than the cost. So basically, if a troop costs 1, you want it to have at least 2 health. If a troop costs 2, you want it to have 3 health. For 4, you want it to have 5 health, and so on. And of course, then you have to also look at the attack stats, and you have to check out like how balanced are the attack stats, and is the troop sacrificing all of its attack just for the health. But the first priority should always be the health. And there is also a second rule of thumb right there, which is that you want your troops to have at least 3 health and no less. Of course, this rule can be overwritten by the troop having a very powerful ability, but more on that later, alright? So the reason for this is that in Warpforge, warlords can also attack. And warlords, most of them, at least except like one specific exception, which is the Swarm Lord, have 2 ranged attack and 2 melee attack. which means that they can deal 2 damage on their turn unless they use some abilities, right? So that means that if you're playing a 2 health troop, your opponent can basically remove it just by attacking with their warlord, and they can then play their own troop, which means that you have just lost your tempo and your opponent has taken it. So as a rule of thumb, just remember that you are not supposed to play troops that have less than 3 health, unless the troop has some very good ability to compensate for it. So let's take a look at 2 examples. The first one is an example of a very good troop, which is the Triarch Praetorian. So when I look at the Triarch Praetorian, I don't even take a look at the abilities. It's already a good troop based on its stats. Look at this. It has 3 energy cost, it has 3 melee and 3 ranged, so none of its attack stats are lower than its cost. That's already good value. And on top of that, he comes with extra health. So he has 4 health. Do you remember what I said? 1 health more than the cost. And on top of that, it also has equal attack stats. So this already makes this a solid unit. Of course, there may be cases where you just have a better option to put in your deck, but if you're a new player and if you're looking for some things in general to fill out your deck with, one good way to just choose it is to look at the stats with this particular way that I taught you. Now let's take a look at the bad unit, which is the Black Legionary. It's a 2 energy unit, but look at this, it has high attack. It has high range attack and high melee attack compared to its cost. So both are 1 up. However, the health is equal to the cost, which in general would not be that catastrophic, but the health is 2. So that means if I'm playing the Black Legionary on my turn, the enemy warlord can just attack it during their turn, destroy it, and then play their own troop, which means that I have just given up tempo to my opponent. Now, based on what we have learned so far, which of these 3 cards would you say is the best just by their stats in relation to their cost? Do not pay any attention to the abilities. Now, if you chose the Kuskin, then your answer is absolutely correct, because based on stats, that is indeed the best unit. So let's take a look at why. The Eliminator of the Marines, it does have a high ranged attack, but it suffers from having the same health as its cost, which kind of breaks the rule that I told you guys about. You need to have health more than your cost, at least by 1. Now the same goes for the Sister Dominion. Just like the Sniper, it also has high ranged attack but suffers from having low health for its cost. Now the Kuskin, on the other hand, which has lower ranged attack compared to the others, actually makes up for it by having 4 health. So this automatically makes the Kuskin better than the others. By stats, once again, I'm saying we're not considering abilities here, but yeah, as I told you, 1 health higher than its cost, thus the Kuskin is the best one from these units. Alright, now I'm sure that you understood the basics of choosing things by their stats, but that might also still leave you with a question. Yeah, but at the start of the video you showed a troop that had terrible stats. On top of that, it broke your rule of 2 HP, and then you had Iskandar Kaon that actually had higher stats, and for its cost it actually has amazing stats. So what gives? Well, that's where we actually come to the more important part. So the first thing is that we need to consider 2 important points. Number 1, the whole stats higher than the cost thing can work, I would say, up until around the 5 energy mark. I could be generous and say 6 energy, but for the most part I would say it works until 5 energy. Once you get higher than that, usually only having high stats is no longer able to cut it, because at that point the game is in the later stages and your HP is under danger, your opponent is probably already developing the board, so just playing something that has big stats no longer does the job. What you do need to look at, however, are 2 main things. Number 1 is that how likely is the troop that you're gonna play to survive. That's number 1. Does it have any defense mechanisms like stealth, like camouflage, or invulnerability? Something that is going to make that's going to give you at least higher chances that it's going to live until the next turn, or it needs to be able to grant you instant value. So you can get instant value a couple of ways in this game. It can be stuff like flank, it can be stuff like fast, it can be stuff like rally. So in most cases, units that instantly can do something once they're put into play mostly will take advantage over units that have to survive a turn in order to give you value. Now, obviously, this is not always the case, because you might have a unit that's such a high threat if it survives that your opponent just has to remove it because otherwise they might lose the game. However, there are not that many units of that type in this game. So, as a rule of thumb, take it like this. If you're playing a unit in the late game only due to its high stats, well, you gotta make sure that it also has something like Vanguard so that it can protect you. So a good example of that would be Archel Gurk and maybe Kato Sicarius. So neither of them are like insanely high level cards, but both of them give you Vanguard, so they at least give you a defensive option. It says that, yeah, I'm playing a big unit with big stats, and I'm going to make sure that this protects my warlord until it is alive. Now, Grook might not have a gigantic amount of health, but it does have armor, which is basically another defense mechanism that you guys probably already know is sometimes even more valuable than health. However, I would say even more than Vanguard, the thing that takes the priority is going to be instant value. So once again, let's check out what you guys have learned. Let's take a look at 3 cards that all cost 4, and I want you guys to think of which is the best one, which is the worst one, and which is the middle one, which is a good card but maybe just inferior to the best one on the list. So these are the Crypto Thrall, Master of Executions, and Warp Talon. Now, first of all, you should instantly by this time be able to identify that Crypto Thrall is the worst unit here. Mainly due to the fact that it breaks, first of all, the whole idea of having more health than your cost. So it has low health, it's just a 4 energy, 4 health unit. On top of that, it also has a vulnerability because it has low ranged attack, and it also has only high melee attack. And yeah, it comes with Vanguard, but it doesn't have the stats necessary to be a good Vanguard unit, and it grants no instant value. Now, the mediocre one, the one that's actually good but not that good, is the Master of Executions. So Master of Executions is definitely not a bad unit. First of all, because it has higher health than its cost. That's why you will see some Chaos players actually running this from time to time. It has high melee attack and a normal ranged attack as well, with a pretty devastating ability. However, the negative side of that ability is that this unit needs to live until the next turn in order to be able to use that ability. Now, stats are alright, and it's a pretty alright unit overall. It's definitely not bad. If you're a beginner, you might consider taking this in. However, the Warp Talon absolutely has it beat, mostly due to 2 things. So first of all, it has, once again, higher health than its cost, which is great. It has very high melee attack. Of course, it sacrifices its ranged attack in favor of that. However, one of the main things that this thing has is the defense mechanism that I was talking about. It has stealth, which means that when you play it, it's almost guaranteed to be safe until the next turn, unless your opponent has a direct answer to a stealth unit, which can be a big AoE, which is gonna have to be a big one because it has 5 health, or anti-stealth troops. So overall, the Warp Talon is the best unit here because of good stats on top of a great defensive ability. Now guys, I'm going to show you 4 different units from the existing factions. They are going to have different costs, and I want you guys to use everything that you learned up until now to identify which 3 cards are really good, which is the worst card here, and which is probably the best one as well. Now, if you identified Tyrannofex as the worst card, then you are absolutely correct. So let's now discuss how this comes to be, because some of you might have made a mistake and said that the Scorpion Exarch was the bad one due to the inferior stats, because as I taught you guys, 5 energy, 442 is like abysmal stats. However, you must also take a look at the abilities that it has. Number one, it has a perfect defensive ability, which is stealth, which means that in most cases this thing is going to survive. And on top of that, it has Shuriken 4, and I assume you guys know what Shuriken is. It means that the unit does 4 damage extra before even attacking, which means that this unit, even though has 4 attack, it can deal up to 8 damage to its target. That includes the enemy warlord, and in most cases it is going to succeed because it has stealth. Now, I definitely wouldn't say that this is the best unit on the list. However, I would say that probably that title goes to either the Crone or Long Strike. Long Strike, even though the stats are not like spectacular, it just has health equal to its cost and less ranged attack and very bad melee attack. It, however, does have a rally, a flank, and long range. So it has 2 instant value abilities, one being rally, another being flank, and long range enables it to attack the target without taking any retaliation damage. So this is a troop that is an insane tempo swing, because when you play this, it allows you to take out the target for free while leaving a big body for you on the board. The Hive Crone is a similar thing. First of all, its stats are pretty good because it has higher health than its cost. 7 health is really good. It has a little bit lower attack than the cost, but on top of that, it's a flying unit, and with the rally, it can instantly deal 3 damage to a chosen enemy, including the enemy warlord. So this, of course, gives you instant value as well. While Tyrannofex may seem like an intimidating foe to the new players because it has insane health, great damage, and then devastating ability, this unit is never going to survive. Whenever you play this, it's instantly going to get removed, and even if you get to the 10 energy mark, if you're playing this unit, you're either losing the next turn because you're getting your warlord is getting destroyed, or maybe you're already winning so hard that this is just going to be an even bigger win. So that's exactly why Tyrannofex is almost never seen being played, while the other 3 you will see as a very common played card. I think every Tau, Eldar, and Tyrannid decks include the 3 cards that you have to the left. Now guys, I hope that this video was useful for you, and this will help you understand which cards are better and which cards are worse, because yeah, sure, you can go on content creator channels and see good decks, but it never hurts to be able to build your decks as well as a new player without relying on others. And I think this video will help you a little bit to understand what is good and what is not, and what's basically a trap card. So thank you for watching, and Ecclesiarch out.